You see, Mr. Tan, the sales for my lavender midnight oil is huge. That's why I need to buy a new tank to support my new production line.
Yes, Miss Zara, but we need to be clear about the solvent. The solvent is volatile chemical. If the pressure tank fails, it will release toxic gas.
Volatile. It look like very productive, right? It can help me to support my new production line. It can produce more lavender oil.
No, Miss Zara, volatile means dangerous. Here, I have highlighted several safety protocols for you.
Grade A seals monthly calibration. Are you crazy? It costs me 5 times more than the standard cost.
Huh? This is necessary, not optional. You must do calibration every month, and you cannot use a cheap rubber seal.
If like that, it's okay lah. I sign for you.
Remember, if the gas release, it will cause blindness and harm to the plant.
Okay, it's okay. Next time we talk. Next time, brother, we talk.
Mister, I have something to tell you. It's about the tank.
Yes, Mr. Ali, please have a seat.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
It's have been 2 months we didn't did the calibration. How about that?
I think the calibration now is very costing. It costs 5,000 ringgit, you know. I think we just use the cheap one because our budget now is deficit. Yeah.
But for the seals, you already used the cheap one like what you mentioned. And do you see the temperature today is 39 degrees? And I think the pressure in the tank is increased.
But
Yeah.
what we can do? We have no budget to make a normal seal. We just use the cheap one.
2 hours later.
My factory is going to expand. I'm going to be millionaire now.
It's too hot today.
The tank!
Mister!
Yes, you want to sell early?
Hey! No, the tank! You see, the heat
happened?
is blending the solvent and the gush is red.
Ayo, what happened? You faster go see what
I
happened.
can't.
Ayo, my
It's
factory.
It is melting.
What the hell, my
It is
factory?
burning.
Oh my
It's
god.
not safe, you see.
Oh, I cannot breathe. Oh, my eye. Oh, I cannot see. What happened? Hey, Leon!
Adi! Wait, I cannot see you, Adi! I cannot see you! Where are you?
What happened?
See my farm, my plant, my money. Oh, man, close the window, Zara, come out! Come out!
Wait, brother, calm down. It's just a small leak.
We need to talk
No
this.
problem.
We need to talk this. Talk this out. Talk this.
Just a small problem.
What Ali said? I heard from Ali. You use cheap seal.
Cheap seal.
Cheap thing can use, man.
Hey, that one is for cost efficient, man. That one is safe.
Cost efficient.
My supplier told me it's safe.
Plantation.
No problem,
My
one.
plantation is plantation. You destroy everything. You destroy everything.
No safety. If today my plant, no problem.
Hey,
I cannot breathe. You want to kill me?
Adi,
That one is my
I don't need to talk to
factory,
you anymore. We go to the police. We go to police.
Hey, chill lah,
You
brother.
die already now. You owe us money,
I'll give you
we,
the answer.
We see you in the court. We see you in the court.
We
see you in the court. In the court.
We have breaking news this evening as a tragic incident unfolds involving a negligent factory.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Keluar Gaji Sekejap. I'm Tekaway, your moderator today. Okay, let's be honest. We have all had bad neighbors. Maybe they play loud music, maybe they park in front of your gate. But imagine, if your neighbor was a factory and suddenly your eyes start stinging and your garden starts dying. And that is exactly what happened last week in Kampung Kachin. It's a mess. Now, as a law student, we look at this and our brains immediately scream one thing: strict liability. Specifically, the rule in Rylands versus Fletcher, can you be held liable even if it was an accident? To break this down, we have 3 legal experts joining us later. But you can't understand the law if you don't understand the pain. So, joining us first is someone who lived through this nightmare last week. Welcome Pak Hadi to the show.
Hi.
To help us break down the legal side, we have our panels of experts. First, to explain the core principle of the rule in Rylands versus Fletcher, we have Professor Law, a specialist in the tort law theory.
Hi.
Next, to help us analyze how past cases apply to Zara Factory, we have Professor Alex, an expert in legal precedents and case analysis.
So hi, I'm Professor Alex.
And finally, to discuss whether Zara has any defenses and what liability she faces, we are joined with Professor Hai. Alright, let's get straight into it. Pak Hadi, take us back to that afternoon. What exactly happened on your farm?
You know, last week was incredibly hot. The sun was burning. Around 2 p.m., I was out in my field. I was feeling very happy because my chilies and my leafy vegetables were growing very well. They were green and almost ready to sell my money. Then suddenly everything changed. I heard a sound from the factory next to me. It's like clank, 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 the machine sound. In a giant pipe leaking air, it's very high pitched, like and the wind blew a cloud over my fence. Then I smell something. I smell very terrible smell. I smell sharp and smell like chemical, and then my eyes cannot see. It's like burning. I feel so discomfort. I have to stay indoors. I cannot go out to breathe. Then I know. I found out that the fume is from the factory out there. It's from the factory. I think all my neighbors, Leon, May, Fatima, they all feel the same. They cannot breathe. And we need to go to see doctor. Appointment also full. Terrible.
Thank you, Pak Hadi. From what we understand, the factory store volatile solvents in pressurized tanks, and the supplier had warned Zara about the need for monthly calibration and specialized seals. However, she skipped maintenance and used cheaper seals to reduce costs. This brings us to the legal discussion. Before we dive deeply into our discussion, we'll see first what are the strict liability rules under Ryland vs. Fletcher.
Certainly, in this case, the defendants hired independent contractors to build a water reservoir on their land. But during construction, the contractors discovered old abandoned mine shafts and failed to seal them properly. When the reservoir was found, the water burst through this shaft and flooded the plaintiff's neighboring mines. Although the defendants were not personally at fault for the poor construction, the Court of Exchequer Chamber and the House of Lords held them legally responsible. This landmark decision established that if a person would bring some things onto their land that is likely to do mischief if it escapes, they are strictly liable for any resulting damage to their neighbors. In this case, Blackburn Judge established 4 elements to be fulfilled to succeed in this tort, which is bring into their land a thing likely to cause damage if escape, intentionally accumulation of it, there is escape, and the damage is foreseeable. Later, it was affirmed by the House of Lords, subject to the additional requirement that the defendant's use of his land should be non-natural.
Oh, I see. Next, I would like to ask Professor Alex. Can you explain what is the 5 elements as Professor Loh talked about?
Okay, sure. The rule in Ryland vs. Fletcher established strict liability. This means that a defendant may be liable without the proof of negligence if 5 of the elements are satisfied. Let's talk about the 5 elements. The first thing, if the thing is likely to cause damage if it escapes. The second is the defendant needs to have the intention to bring or accumulate the thing. The third is the escape of the things is also one of the elements to establish strict liability. The fourth one is non-natural use of the land will also establish strict liability. And lastly, the element to establish strict liability is foreseeability of the type of damage. So first, let's talk about the element that likely to cause strict liability. So the first thing is a thing likely to cause damage if it escapes. This element applies when the defendant brings something that is possible to cause damage if the thing escapes. It did not require the thing to be dangerous per se, but it will become sufficient once it escapes. So secondly, let's talk about the second element to establish strict liability. The defendant needs to have the intention to bring or accumulate the thing. The defendant will be liable if he intends to bring, collect or accumulate the thing on the land for his own purposes. It does not require the defendant intention to cause harm. This rule does not apply to the thing that have naturally presented on the land unless the defendant has knowledge or intentionally allows the danger factor to remain or escape. So third, the escape of the thing is also one of the elements to establish strict liability. So the plaintiff needs to prove the escape of the dangerous thing that happened from the defendant's land, either under his control or not. So besides, the liability under the rule of Ryland vs. Fletcher also arose if there was non-natural use of land. It means special or unusual use of the land will cause the risk of danger increase due to the non-natural use of the land by the defendant. If the land has been used for ordinary or common purposes, this element would not be fulfilled. So additionally, to establish the strict liability, there must be a foreseeability of the type of damage. The harm of damage must be reasonably foreseeable at the time the defendant accumulated the dangerous thing. This requirement has aligned with strict liability with nuisance principles. It caused confusion to identify and clarify whether the cause of action actually is a strict liability or nuisance. So if these 5 elements all fulfill, then that person will be strictly liable for the resulting damage. This principle has been consistently used and applied in Malaysian courts, although with modern refinements.
Thank you, Professor Alex. In summary, there are 5 elements to be fulfilled, which things likely to cause damage if escape, intentional storage or accumulation, escape, non-natural use of land, and foreseeability of damage. Now, based on these elements, we will critically discuss and analyze the recent case of Zara with Prof, and Pak Hadi will help us with the details of the incident. Now, we will ask Professor Hai whether in the incident fulfills the first element which the solvent stored by Zara qualifies as a thing likely to cause damage if it escapes.
Before I answer that question, I will go through the scenario and analyze first. In Zara's case, she owned a small essential oil bottling factory that located at the edge of the semi-rural town, and there are several tanks installed. In the tanks, I want to confirm with Pak Hadi. Is it filled with volatile planted solvents which release the hazardous fumes? Am I correct, Mr. Hadi?
Yes.
I see. In this scenario, although the solvents are plant-based, they are volatile and pressurized, and the fumes are known to be hazardous. For this incident, I have several cases that are similar to this scenario. The first case is the case of Petronas, Gas Berhad and DWZ Industrial Johor, Sdn Berhad and another. In this case, the plaintiff is a company whose core business involved separating natural gas into components, followed by transport, distributions, and the sales of those industrial utilities. The first defendant is subsidiary of the second defendant. They both run businesses specializing in providing surface finishing for metal parts used in the electric and electronic sectors. Additionally, they also offer a comprehensive array of cleaning, washing, electroplating service to contract manufacturers. In this case, the plaintiff land was adjusted to first defendant land. The plaintiff found that there was a gas leak due to rupture in their pipeline at a specific point, which is reported as Z75 and Z74. The plaintiff found that the rupture is caused by discharge of the defendant's factory industrial liquid waste. Plaintiff also found under his land there is an underground sump inside the factory connected through the side wall to a covered underground sump outside. From that outside sump, a 4-inch PVC pipe runs 50 meters to discharge into a nearby river. According to the evidence, the inside sump is used to store untreated water, which is highly acidic and was constructed without the consent of the landowner. Other than that, the feeding was used to transport industrial liquid waste through the inside and outside sumps, and eventually to a land nearby to plaintiff because the outside sump was broken. In this case, the defendant stores industrial waste which is highly acidic. The release of it will cause the soil of the land to become more acidic and will cause corrosion. Other than that, in the case of Ang Hong Tai and Tan Som Lee, the defendant stored petrol for his business on the ground floor of a carpenter's wooden shop. The defendant lived on the floor above. The petrol caught fire and caused damage. In examining the element likely to cause damage if it escaped in the street liability torts, the court examined the evidence of how it was kept and what it did when escaped. The court does not analyze whether a petrol, in a legal textbook sense, is always dangerous per se. The court analyzes whether something that is dangerous depends on facts and circumstances, not whether it is dangerous per se or not. Refer back to this incident. Zara stores volatile plant-based solvents which is known to release hazardous fumes when the pressure system malfunctions. The hazardous fume will cause irritations and harm the plants when it is leaked. Therefore, Zara case fulfill the first element.
Oh, I see. From what Professor Hai said, we conclude that what Zara store is dangerous if released, and it fulfills the first elements. Next, we'll move on to the next element, which is intentional accumulation. Can you explain this to us, Professor Long?
No problem, Mr. Kawai. For this question, I would like to refer to the case of Petronas as Prof. Hai mentioned previously. In this case, the defendants collected highly acidic industrial effluent in and inside some at their factory. It was done intentionally where it was proved that the defendants deliberately constructed a bypass system including an underground fitting and sumps to store this acidic water and divert it into the river instead of treating it properly. Also, in the case of Kara Land Sanjam Berhad versus Chia Su Ni, the plaintiff purchased a piece of agricultural land which is identified as Lot 301 with a pre-existing stream flowing through it and sued the defendant, claiming that the defendant was liable for the stream's presence, invoking the principle of intentional storage or intentional accumulation, which is a necessary element for strict liability. The High Court determined that the element was not met as the stream was a pre-existing feature on Lot 301 and the defendant therefore could not be said to have brought water into plaintiff land and caused the flood. Noting the flow was a natural gravitational occurrence because the stream was a natural feature beyond the defendant's control and not an intentional accumulation. The court concluded that the defendant could not be said to have caused nuisance to the plaintiff and the appeal was allowed. Back to the scenario, Zara deliberately installed several large pressurized tanks to store volatile plant-based solvents which are to be used in the extraction process. This shows clear intention of Zara that the solvent is brought into her land and accumulate on her own land, same as the case of Petronas, and not like the case of Kara that it was natural.
Thank you, Professor Nok, for the explanation. The next one is, does Zara's factory amount to non-natural use of land? Can you explain this, Professor Alex?
Okay, so yes, Kawe, according to most judge reasoning, the non-natural use refers to a special use that increases danger to others and is not merely ordinary use. Based on the case of Petronas, the court held that using an illegal bypass to transfer untreated water into the river rather than processing it through the wastewater treatment is a non-natural use of the land. The court also emphasized that there must be a non-natural use of the land which increases danger to others rather than being a general benefit of the community. So this can also be seen in the case of An Hock Tai versus Tam Soon Lee and another, where the defendant stored petrol for his business on the ground floor of a shophouse. The plaintiff lived on the floor above. The petrol caught fire and caused damage. The court held that storage of a petrol, a hazardous substance in a shophouse where people live, was held to be a non-natural use of land. Also, in the case of SAS Industries, Sdn Bhd and another versus Perbandanan Kemajuan Negeri Selangor, the plaintiff sued the defendant for damages after their factory was flooded by water, silt and mud escaping from the defendant constructed silt traps at a project site. The plaintiff claimed the accumulation of water and sediment in the traps constitute a non-natural use of the land, making the defendant strictly liable under the rule of Riley versus Fletcher. The court rejected this, finding the construction of silt traps was not done for the defendant's own purposes, but was a lawful act performed under a legal directive from local authorities, which includes Jabatan Pengairan Sailaran (JPS) and Majlis Daerah Hulu Selangor (MDHS). The ruling held that the building of the traps to manage the surface water and sediments for public benefit and infrastructure was considered a natural use of the land, thereby failing the non-natural use elements required in the rules of Riley versus Fletcher to apply. Consequently, the claim was dismissed. Back to the scenario. So, Zara factory is located at the edge of a semi-rural town, and she installed a very large pressurized tank storing volatiles and solvents. This increased the risk to nearby residents and farms. The Petronas case supports this, where bypassing proper treatment system was considered a non-natural used due to increased danger. In contrast, SAS Industry versus Perpadanan Kemajuan Negeri Selangor involves silk thread built under legal directive for public benefits, which the court held to be a natural use. Zara's situation is totally different because her activity was purely for a private commercial gain. Therefore, I would say that the element of non-natural use is fulfilled because the installation or accumulation of pressurized tank in a semi-rural town increase the danger to the neighborhood and not for the purpose of the benefit of all.
Oh, thank you, Professor Alex, for the very clear and insightful explanation, where he defined what is non-natural use and natural use. Next, I would like to ask Professor Hai whether there is an escape under the rule in which our fourth element.
Yes, of course, Kawei. Escape requires the things to move from the land under the defendant's control to a land outside it. I would like to use again the case of Petronas, where in this case there is an escape of industrial liquid waste which is located by the defendant at one place and released or transferred into the river and cause the soil to become more acidic and rupture by the plaintiff pipelines. In the case of KHY Foods and Beverage Sdn Bhd and Plaza Mon Kiara Management Corporations, the plaintiff Audi car parked in the jockey parking area within the premise of the defendant Plaza Mon Kiara. A tree located on the defendant premise collapsed and crushed the car, causing it damage, and the court held that the tree falls within the defendant premise, therefore is no escape. In Zara case, the fumes escaped from Zara's factory and drifted into neighboring properties. This is similar to the Petronas case, where the volatile plants-based solvents, which will release the hazardous fumes, which was kept by Zara in the pressurized tank, escaped to neighboring properties. There is common ground where the things that were stored by them escaped from their place to others' place and caused harm to the others. It is distinguishable from KHY Food and Plaza Mon Kiara case, where the damage occurred entirely within the defendant premise, and thus no escape was found. There is no escape from accumulating things into other place which the defendant had no control over.
Oh, easy to say, there must be a thing that goes into another place that defendant has no control. Am I right, Professor Hai?
Yes.
Thank you, Professor Hai, for the clear analysis. Lastly, we will talk about the fifth and the last element, which is foreseeability. Can Professor Low explain this to us?
Yeah, of course. In the case of Petronas, the consequences for the escape of the accumulated industrial liquid waste should be foreseeable by the defendant, where highly acidic liquid will pollute the soil and the nature of the high acidic liquid will cause corrosion. Therefore, the corrosion of the plaintiff pipeline should have foreseeable consequences by the defendant, and they will be liable because the escape causes corrosion to the plaintiff pipeline. In the case of Ahmad Rubio bin Ahmad and others, and Minda Muhibah Sdn Bhd and another, the plaintiff claimed that the defendant's construction of a reinforced concrete will cause water, sludge, and materials to escape and flood their homes. The defendants demonstrated that they had secured all necessary approvals from relevant authorities for the development and the reinforced concrete wall. Crucially, they proved that the actual source of the flooding was a massive volume of surface runoff water from the adjacent MRR2 highway upgrading works, which began after the defendant's approval were granted. Furthermore, the flooding incidents only ceased after JKR took mitigating action by sealing a sump on the MRR2 drain. The court dismissed the suit as plaintiff failed to prove causation, as evidence was pointed to the actions of the third parties as the effective cause of the flooding, not the defendant's construction activities. Back to the scenario, the escape of the fumes will cause harm to people, and plants would be foreseeable by Zara because she knows that it is hazardous and volatile. Zara was expressly warned by the supplier that monthly calibration was required, and for this use could cause leakage of hazardous fumes. The escape of the fumes will cause harm to people and plants would be foreseeable by Zara because she knows that it is hazardous and volatile. This aligns with the case of Petronas, which corrosion was foreseeable and distinguishes in the case of Ahmad Lubio, where causation was not proven.
Thank you, Professor No. This comes to an end to the discussion on the element of strict liability under the rule in Ryder vs. Fletcher. For our last session, we are going to dive more deeply into the discussion and analysis of Zara's case and discuss the defenses that can be used in this tort in several situations. I would like to discuss two defenses and analyze the case of Zara in different situations. Who would like to start this first?
I would like to be the first one, okay? The first defense that I think is most common is defense of the acts of God. I would like to create a situation where Ms. Zara properly follows the instructions of the supplier to do calibration every 2 months and does not use cheaper seals. For this situation, I would like to use the case of SAS Industries Sedia Berhad and other, and Perbadanan Kemajuan Negeri Selangor. In this case, the court found that the defendant had strictly adhered to their obligations by appointing professional consultants and contractors, and by building the silt traps according to the specific technical requirements of the Urban Stormwater Management Manual of Malaysia and the directive of local authorities like JPS and MDHS, by showing that the silt traps were built to legal standards and had even survived a heavier rainfall of 104 mm previously. Once the court was satisfied that the defendant had done everything reasonably required by the law and engineering standards, the unusual occurrence of the rainfall on November 18, 2016 moved from being a manageable event to a legal act of God. The judge concluded that because the defendant had not been negligent in their maintenance and the instruction was not unusual or non-natural, they could not be held responsible for an overflow caused by a natural event. An act of God requires an extraordinary and unforeseeable natural event, and the defendant has reasonably done what he is responsible to do. Compared to the Zara case, due to her failure to maintain the tanks and use proper seals, even if an unusual event happened, she cannot use the defense of the act of God because it would be preventable if she followed the instruction. Therefore, if she follows the instruction, she may defend with the defense of the act of God.
Thank you, Professor No, for the explanation. For the last one before we end, can we have Professor Alex or Professor Hai?
Okay, I will share the last defense for today, which is the defense of the plaintiff default. I would like to create the situations where the farmer grows a specific breed, highly sensitive, and needs to live in a greenhouse. If he neglected the maintenance of his greenhouse to save money, Zara could argue that the escape was due to plaintiff's default. I would like to invoke the case of Petronas, where the defendants argued that the pipeline damage was due to plaintiff's failure to install or maintain a protective heat shrink sleeve HSS. The court rejected this only because the evidence shows that the HSS was blown away by the gas pressure, not removed by the plaintiff itself. If the damage to the pipeline was caused by plaintiff faults, the defendant may escape from the liabilities. Same to the case of Zara, where she would not be liable if she could prove that the damage the farmer suffered was caused by himself.
Okay, thank you, Professor Hai, for the previous sharing. Now it comes to the end of our podcast. Big thanks to our guests for sharing a lot of valuable information to us, and also thanks to Pak Hadi for being with us until the end of the podcast. Thank you for watching. See you next time in Kedua Kaki Sekejap. Bye!